Did it advance? Great. Next slide. Here's the benefits of doing this and why I love this. Because when I started back in '96, it was under a different federal law, the Job Training and Partnership Act. And the focus on economic development or even business development, job creation, or business inclusion in that kind of federal workforce training that we did wasn't really there. We were just supply side all the time. Train, 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 and hope those individuals get jobs and hope those businesses get the qualified workers that they're seeking. When the new federal law came online in 2000, it mandated a different focus for us, and I won't go into the details, but we had to pay attention and vector in on the business case so much more differently than in the previous law. And all my workforce development partners, I see heads nodding in the rooms, know that, and it's really been critical to our work. But what's great about it is it means in every grant that we write and try and fund, we've got to think of it through the business lens as well. And that's why for us personally, partnerships like with Enterprise Seattle or other economic development shops or industry associations are fabulous for us to help think through the business case before we even put pen to paper to make sure that the training that we're doing is actually meeting an end input business need. Second great thing in doing this is we don't have to do it all ourselves. And we shouldn't. We're not nearly that good by a long shot. We're good at some things, but if we can fund the talents in our community that are great to do the work that we're not so good at, it's wonderful. So we've got great evaluation firms that we work with that we can fund through some of this, great economic development that we can fund, great training. Our community and technical colleges are awesome in King County, and we get to make that happen on a big scale through the grants. Third, through doing grant development, we have a chance to operate in realer time. So when we do a grant in our shop, I've got in my office, I've got a 4x8 whiteboard. It's my favorite piece of equipment I've ever used. Beats my iPhone, beats my computer, the TiVo at home, which my kids love, but it even beats that. I am a whiteboard junkie. And when we do a grant, it's kind of a thought session. When I've identified our internal team, we come into my office and we start doing grant design. It is so much fun. It's the one chance in my work life that I get to be incredibly creative. It's a blank canvas. It's like being an artist. And we put up the design, and we've got the inputs and the outputs and the budget, and making sure the budget aligns with what we're doing, our partnerships, timelines. This thing becomes just a gigantic, beautiful, multicolored mess on this whiteboard. But what we do over that time is, and I watch our staff, they love it. Everybody loves to create. They don't like to write as much, by the way, on the back end once we've locked the design, but they love to create. And that's really fun for all of us. And that stays on my whiteboard from beginning to end. And we're constantly testing it. If we find a grant flaw in design or a partner fails or doesn't follow through on their commitment, it impacts the design, and we come right back to the whiteboard and we retest it to make sure it holds. And it's really fun, and we add colors. But a good grant design is strong enough on day one to withhold any eventuality on the back end. And if I'm late in a grant, like 5 days to go, and we're still having to come back to that design and recalibrate it, we're not going to get that grant. It's almost impossible. So the whiteboard's really, really an important part, but it's a chance to behave in realer time because we're doing that design work in real time. I use the example of health IT as on this realer time issue too, because I know nothing about that, really, right? But everybody's all hot for it right now, really. Health IT is a real big need in our community. Our hospitals want it, long-term care want it. They're trying to adjust to the healthcare law change coming, and what does it mean? But we don't know exactly what the certs are and what the career pathways are yet. We're working with our colleges and our industry partners to figure it out. But it doesn't get better than this because everyone's trying to figure it out. So I love that creative work that grant development and fund development brings into our organization's health and well-being. And then ideally, if we're doing this right, we're linking industry demand with our supply and credentials on the job seeker side. And it's an opportunity really for us to have a more competitive regional economy, which I totally believe in. I want, actually I don't want this. I was gonna say I want everybody to move to the Seattle area. I'm a Seattle native. I actually don't want any more people to move to the Seattle area, but I do want Seattle to thrive and prosper. And as somebody who grew up in the sticks of Kirkland back in the day, it is unbelievable to me that the Bellevue Square Mall turned into what it turned into. It used to be just a Fredericks and Nelson. It's unbelievable to me that there is Amazon, Starbucks, Boeing was always here, Microsoft, good Lord. None of that existed. So it's pretty amazing to me all the change that's happened in our community. I'm done with my little personal side. Partnerships to do this. The golden chalice that we always seek in grant development is specific employers. If we can get an employer to join us, I do the incredibly laughable happy dance in my office next to that multicolored whiteboard. So the grant we did 2 weeks ago, we were able to get, in a whole hell of a lot of effort, I hope I can say that on the tape, is we got Microsoft on board, James help me, who else? What other? Boeing. Volt Technical Resources, F5 Networks, Swedish Hospital. Okay. It was quite. It was a lot of work to get that, and Microsoft took us down to like 30 minutes before the FedEx drop, but we got it in. And when you can get that, and they commit to your grant strategy, it makes it really worthwhile. Other partners that we try and get, or that we work with really regularly, are our associate development organizations, Enterprise Seattle being the lead for us in King County. Industry associations, we work with the Health Workforce Association, the Manufacturing Industrial Council, and others, which are incredibly helpful. Community-based organizations, city, county government. By the way, politics matters in grant development, I've found over time. I can't get away from it. So we're jointly overseen, as an aside on the city-county government piece, by the King County Executive and the City of Seattle Mayor. Both oversee our work. And they both have their own economic development divisions. So we have to be very conscious of that in the politics and the partnerships when we're doing grant design and trying to take care of our whole community. And sometimes we have to say no, and for all the right reasons, and we're usually able to get through it. But city and county government is something we need to pay attention to as well as organized labor. All right, so all of those first slides were kind of the what's and the why's. Why is this important? What is it about? Now I want to tell you how we do it. And hopefully some of these sub-bullets, and I'm sorry there's so many on each slide, but I was working within the limits, is to help see if there's something up here that you can hold on to and take back to your own shops or your own partners in your own communities. So I did this in two chunks. Structural chunks, things that need to be in place operationally to make this work, and then the harder nut, behavioral chunks within your organization, because those are equally important, but they're harder to do. So here's my hows. Structural, identify sources of potential funding support throughout the organization. So if you want to get funds, where do you go to get them? And that takes some thought. And there are websites, the federal government has them, Department of Commerce has them that link you to grant opportunities. There, in the philanthropic world, there are websites that we used to be a member of, we're not so much anymore, that will tell you what each philanthropy in your local area is willing to fund, and you'd be surprised how many of them give a darn about economic development. It's surprising, and it's out there, but it's an untapped resource. So you need to identify sources of potential funding support. So we have that, and we have a staff person who's culling that constantly, single point of contact. And at the point where something comes in, he's a lovely man, if you ever come in our front office, by the way, his name's Hugh. Hugh writes up the one-page, not to exceed one-page description of the grant, and it has to include some elements like who's eligible, how much money is it, what partners are required, what's the overall strategy, timeline, et cetera. And we don't ask Hugh to do how does it align with our mission. He's just really putting in place the nuts and bolts. That one pager comes forward to our management team every Tuesday if there's a grant in. We hold a standing fund development conversation every Tuesday morning, and we go through the list of potential grants that are out there and we look at them. That's where we hold the conversation at the management level about alignment with mission and whether or not we should go or not. And that's happening on an every 7-day basis. And some Tuesdays there's nothing in-house and we move on to the next topic. But we've created the bubble, the structure that this conversation is happening consistently and regularly on our staff. And thank God for Hugh. I would encourage you too to hold the development conversation in your organizations year-round regardless of budget. So I've done this in times that are lean with other managers overseeing me, and panic comes through the shop. Like, we needed $5 million 3 years ago. And all that pressure and emotion and stuff comes on just a few people. I've found it better, regardless if you're flush. It's going to be a while before that happens again, I think, for all of us. But we've had that. Don't avoid that conversation. Keep it consistent. For us, it's weekly, and I don't care what our operating budget is or how many grants we've got. You just keep it consistent throughout. Don't float your behaviors with your budget. Keep consistent with your strategy. So develop grant tracking and workup structure. I talked about Hugh. And here's a key one I've learned the hard way. Compose your needs, desires, and designs, your grant design strategies now, before you even start to look for a grant. Because then it makes it a heck of a lot easier when one drops for you to go, that's the one, and we're ready to go, and it makes it fast. So case in point on this, I'm nervous someone's gonna come and give me what do you call those little hooks. So I'm trying not to go over. I got to 115, right, Jeff? Is that, so we wanted to serve youth offenders in our community and get them access into employment, right? Because from a youth development lens, if you get a young person hooked into the world of work, you keep them busy, and that's important, but you also put some money in their pocket, and that's important. But you also get them on a pathway to think about their futures and career pathways and post-secondary education and being that worker that a company eventually wants to hire for the long term. And we had held that conversation with our community partners, juvenile court, the CBOs, the government, even some businesses that were willing to hire some young offenders. And for those of you who don't know, and most of you probably do, most businesses won't hire offenders. So if you get a few that will, it's worth it. We already had that thing canned. And it sat for about 4 or 5 months. Not written, but all the design work was done, and it was in a manila folder. And then Department of Labor released a federal youth offender grant. And bam, that was fun because everything was ready to go, and we pushed it out and the partners were strong. We got it, and that was $2 million that we were ready to go get. We were just waiting for the right time. So think ahead what you want to do in your community, design it, articulate it, and wait, because the opportunity will come. And then implement a structure that works best for you and your organization to do this. We've tried it each way. We've tried an outside grant writer. We've tried we've hired it out, we've done it inside, we've done blended teams where I've had people an outside grant writers co-writing with our grant writers. We've tried them all. At the end of the day, I have found it easier for us just to do it internally if we can create the bubble. Sometimes we can't because we have too many commitments in our community that we need to honor with our staff resources, and we can't. We've got to default to a different grant strategy, but inside, outside, or a combo works. Anyone here from Yakima? Central Washington, maybe? Hi, welcome. I have a dear friend who is a grant writer for the Yakima Valley Farm Workers Clinic and has been for about a decade. She and her husband moved to Melbourne, Australia because he's in the fruit industry, and apples went kind of down in Washington State. He got a job in Australia, and so they moved. And she is a heck of a grant writer. She pulls in Robert Wood Johnson grants and a whole bunch of other big grants for the Farm Workers Clinic in Yakima. And the Farm Workers Clinic held on to her. And she's been grant writing for them for the last 5 years from Melbourne and still pulling in the top dollar. And they support her in doing that, and she can be with her kids, and she loves grant writing. And it doesn't matter that she's half a continent away. And I reference that point to you because there are lots of different ways to go about bringing in resources for your initiatives. You don't always have to do it yourself. You can do a combo or you can hire out, but you need to find who your team is and who's capable enough to do it.